So let's talk a little bit about mark making. And even the youngest child, even an infant and a toddler, can certainly make marks. And you'll notice that when you're in the classroom yourself, as an educator, I go in a lot as a consultant. I'm often using a clipboard or a little notebook. I'll sit on the floor, engaging with the children and watching them, and I'll have a pencil or pen in my hand and a notebook or a clipboard, and I'm writing, and the infant will crawl over and take the pencil out of my hand and make marks on my clipboard or my notebook. They are so interested in this whole idea of mark making. When you think about it, you have a blank piece of paper, and for somebody who's new to this, it's quite magical to change that piece of blank paper into something else with marks. It's almost like a magic process. So many different ways to make marks, and all of these materials should be available to children, nicely displayed. So if we go to just the ordinary pencil, many people with toddlers use a chubbier pencil, and you can do that. But I find what's more important with toddlers is to use a shorter pencil, because they tend to lose control as the pencil kind of moves around if it's longer. So there is the regular pencil. There are black and white drawing pencils and every shade in between. We should be aware of the difference between the different levels of softness in a pencil. A drawing pencil is going to be a certain number of HB on the side. This is marked on the side of your pencil. So some are very soft, and some are very hard in terms of the lead. So we should be aware of that and how it works. Of course, we can give them different kinds of paper to work on. So a pencil can give a hard line. This is very charcoaly, very soft. It can be a very soft line, and everything in between. And of course, you can shade. You know, if you're using a white pencil with a black pencil, you can create shades. And an ordinary old lead pencil it can also be very hard and very soft. These are things that children can learn, that there are many ways to use a pencil on its tip and on its side. So when they are feeling, sort of confident with a pencil, you can introduce things like a fine-tipped marker. Black markers are beautiful for exact drawings. So when we use I was referring before to the very detailed bird drawing that we saw an image of. That was done with a regular pencil, but that kind of drawing is lovely if you do it with a very fine black tip marker. It's a very fine line, and it's very deep and there's a lot of contrast, and so children really like that. So fine tip markers, you can use a fine tip Sharpie, for instance. These are art markers, but you don't need to go to that expense. You could go to a stationery store like Staples and buy a package of fine tipped Sharpies. People worry about using Sharpies because they are not erasable, but really, it doesn't really matter if we get marker on our hands. It's no big deal. So black and white is very powerful, as we've seen in some of these images that we looked at earlier. White marks on black paper, this kind of shading. Children often don't think of using mark-making materials on their side. So this is something that if they accidentally do it, you can comment on. That's making a different mark. How did you make that? And then there are things when you want to start using color, like pastels. You can get chalk pastels and you can get oil pastels. These are oil, and they tend to be quite vibrant in their colors, very satisfying, very smooth. There's a lot of nice sensory feedback from an oil pastel, so they give a nice mark. And then, of course, the color is very intense, very satisfying to children. So I don't use regular crayons very often with young children because I find that the colors are not as intense and they are not as satisfying in terms of the feel of it on the page. They tend to be kind of sticky when you use them on regular paper. They tend to sort of falter, and they're sometimes hard to move across the page. And so I prefer to use oil pastels. They will last a long time. They're stronger. They don't break easily. And I think are much more satisfying to children. And then we get to charcoal. Now, charcoal is very interesting. It's very delicate, and that is a word that we can use with children. You can get charcoal in different thicknesses. So you can see that this is quite thick, and this is very slender. It's very fragile. It's made from burnt wood. That's where charcoal comes from. You can actually make your own charcoal with children if you were being adventurous. But they do have to know that it's fragile, and we can use that word. We can ask them, so, this is a new material. We haven't seen this before. How is this different from a pencil? And ask them those questions when they're exploring. They will very quickly find out that when they press on a piece of charcoal, it snaps very, very easily. That will happen as soon as they use it. That's fine. So we can comment on that. That snapped really easily. So what do you think we should do? How should we use this? And then children can learn that when you use charcoal, it's a very soft motion, and then it won't break. And again, you could use it on its side. Charcoal, again, is very satisfying. It covers a lot of space in a short time. This is a little thicker. If you can find this, it's less fragile, but see, it still breaks. And that's okay. Children should not worry about charcoal breaking. It's going to happen. It happens to adults. And so they can use it in smaller pieces to start with if they want. But look at the beautiful marks that this makes, very chunky, very, very vibrant, very solid. So I would certainly offer this to children, no doubt, from toddlerhood upwards. I would offer it to them just for the different experience of making all these marks. Something for you to experiment with too. Many adults have not used charcoal. So I'm going to invite you from here on in to work with your facilitator and use all these materials in many different ways so that you feel comfortable with them.